Hey guys, SuperHorrorBro Mike here, and in today's Deltarune theory, we take a look at the character of Kris, and a theory which may explain not only the sinister motives behind his character, but also the direction the game's story is headed itself. Is Kris the real villain of Deltarune? Watch on to find out. Let's begin by taking a brief look at the relationship between the Lightners and Darkners, the two races that make up the surface and underworlds in Deltarune's universe. Ralsei tells the story of how light and dark lived in balance, which brought peace to the world, but this balance could be ended and this would cause a great calamity. He goes on to detail the destruction of the world. So the balance between Lightners and Darkners is very important to maintaining peace in this world. But what exactly is the Dark World? Is it a place that simply exists below the human realm, as with the caves of Mount Ebott in Undertale? I don't believe so personally. I feel the world the Darkners inhabit is in fact a creation brought to life by the minds of the Lightners. A world created by their hopes and dreams. Their subconscious desires, if you will. We see these lines mentioned by Ralsei during his story, and the theme of hopes and dreams, much like Undertale, runs throughout the first chapter of Deltarune. We see the hopes and dreams of characters who enter this world coming true too. Susie is a social outcast due to her dark nature on the surface world, but in this underworld, her dreams of fitting in and making friends who look up to her come true. The same can be said for Kris, who seems like a lonely child living in a town full of monsters in his day-to-day life, but in this world created by the minds of fellow Lightners, his dreams of acceptance come true. Also, let us take a look at Ralsei and how this character tells us a great deal about Kris too. Ralsei is perhaps the strongest force of good in the game, a force of pure kindness so great that at times his naivety even gets the party in trouble. On the surface world, Kris has a brother called Asriel, who is pretty much the perfect big brother, going by information we learn throughout the game. Asriel is at university, has won many accolades and achievements, and is well liked about town. By the same token, if we take a look at Kris, the opposite can be said. Kris is a troubled kid. He is known for being a prankster, and also for doing some pretty creepy stuff around town, such as hiding under other children's beds at night, and pretending to slash himself by covering his arms in tomato ketchup. Many of the monsters around the town reference his abhorrent behaviour and shady history. So it's interesting that these two kids with a dark past, both outsiders, are the only characters who find themselves in a world of hopes and dreams. A way of redemption for their past, perhaps. So Kris is the opposite of his brother Asriel, and so projects this beacon of light and aspiration in his life on the surface world into creating a character who is the embodiment of these traits in the Darkner realm. After all, Ralsei is an anagram for Asriel. Kris misses his brother and his guidance, and so has created a version of him here within his subconscious. But how does this make Kris a villain? Well, it doesn't, but this is important information to lay the foundation for this theory. Before tackling the important question of why Kris is the villain of the game, we must quickly touch on our role in Deltarune as the player. Anyone who has played creator Toby Fox's previous game Undertale is surely aware of the way that game slyly referenced the player by breaking the fourth wall at certain moments, often for comedic value. I believe Deltarune is taking this concept one step further in a far darker and more sinister way. From the very beginning, Deltarune has presented itself as a survey, one that we as the player participate in before we can enter the actual game to begin with. This survey allows us to create an avatar and then give it a name. Selecting certain names associated with Undertale yields some unexpected results, with the game making reference to them directly. But in the end, none of it matters, as choice is removed from the player altogether, and we are thrust into the story of Kris. We see this removal of choice throughout the game. For example, it is impossible to play a genocide run and make certain negative choices. The game seems to push us towards a pacifist ending, almost as if the game itself is the force of good in this world and is controlling us, the player, and dictating our choices to make sure we save the Darkness world and restore balance to the universe. Then, at the end of the chapter, Kris rips out his soul, which we know represents us as the player, as we can control the heart after he throws it into a cage. And this cage seems to have had many hearts trapped inside it in the past. Even when looking at this cage at the beginning of the game, we see blood smeared around it. Could it be this survey program has been recruiting players in the past to try and use Kris as a vessel to save the world? But each time it fails to sustain the host, as Kris always finds a way to get back in touch with his troubled side, the side of his personality we have heard so much about in the past, and remove these players from his being. Basically, the game itself controls the player, who it inserts inside Kris's body, so it can then control him to not only save the world from destruction, but also realise Kris's hopes and dreams. After all, upon first entering the Darkner world and saving our game, we observe the previous save file is that of Kris himself, which we must then overwrite with our player's name, suggesting we are now in control of Kris's body. But then comes another important question. If Kris is this troubled kid who is prone to acting out and distancing himself from others, but dreams of becoming a better person, then why would he be so resistant to the player helping him achieve this? Why does Kris seem to be heading down a dark path, and, judging by the ending, a path of eventual evil that may cause the destruction of the world? Is Kris truly the villain of this story? Well, if this theory is correct, yes and no. We've just covered how Kris seems to be a receptive vessel for other souls, similar to our character in Undertale, which contained the essence of both good and evil, Frisk and Chara respectively. So in Deltarune, if we are essentially assuming the role of Frisk, then the other side of Kris's personality would be controlled by, you guessed it, Chara. Toby Fox has said this game does not take place in the world of Undertale, but what we must remember is that this game has way too many similarities with Undertale to be totally separate altogether. Many people believe Deltarune is an alternate universe on a different timeline to that of Undertale, and if this is true, it would mean these two worlds are indeed unrelated. However, it also means certain characters may remain exactly the same across both games. These characters would be Chara, Sans, and potentially Papyrus. I've covered a theory explaining how Sans is the same character across both games, so check that out for a more detailed analysis. But essentially in Undertale, we have many references by Sans of how he is able to time travel, as well as seeing him time jump in gameplay, and there are even characters who reference his sudden appearance in the town of Snowdin. Now with Chara, a soul who is essentially able to inhabit the body of a human child, it seems likely a non-physical being such as this could also travel between dimensions and inhabit new vessels. During the final moments of Undertale, Chara speaks to us, saying, "Let us erase this pointless world and move on to the next." With what we know about Deltarune's story centering around the attempt to prevent the destruction of the world, and Chara's potential ability to move between dimensions, destroying them in the process, it seems the hidden connection between the two games is in fact Kris's possession by Chara. So Kris isn't exactly evil, but has grown up with the influence of a nefarious dormant spirit who has been making him do more and more heinous acts, which allow him to enter the world of the Darkness and help bring about their destruction. Unless of course we as the player, who essentially assume the role of Frisk, can stop her and free Kris once and for all from her grasp. During Chapter 1, the game itself is using us as the other host in order to try and restore balance to this world, hence the reason we are forced to play pacifist and are unable to kill anyone in the game. However, we are removed from Kris's body by Chara once again, and seem to have befallen the same fate as many others before us. This potentially means Kris may well continue playing the villain, and perhaps in the next chapter, Chara will take control of the player and force us down a genocidal route, killing everyone. Deltarune seems to be a game all about removing that choice Undertale once gave players and forcing us into a predetermined storyline where the outcome, for now, is uncertain. And that's it for today's video. Please remember to give it a like if you did enjoy watching, and maybe drop a comment too, as well as subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you never miss an upload. This channel specializes in variety horror content, including creepypasta readings, horror gaming facts and theories, and general interest pop culture horror videos. So if you're interested in all things spooky, you'll find something to enjoy here at SuperHorrorBro. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.